Good afternoon, dear friends. I'm glad to welcome you to a course on knowledge management, not just management in general. Today we have our first class, an introduction to knowledge management. We'll learn what it is, why it's needed, and how it's typically done. Plus, we'll look at some company case studies. Why would anyone need to study how to manage knowledge in a company? The thing is, in the age of artificial intelligence, when basic publicly available knowledge becomes accessible to any company, it's the unique knowledge about the company that constitutes its most valuable asset. And someone who knows how to organize, accumulate, store, and distribute this data will always be valuable to a company. This is the course website. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Mike Pritula. I've worked at Alpha Bank, STB TV channel, Wargaming, Preply, Ideal, and consulted for PeopleForce. In different companies, I found myself working on something, developing, implementing things, and needing to leave it behind in the company so it could work without me. For example, when I was building the recruiting process at STB TV channel, I documented everything in detail so that when I hired new recruiters, I could train them quickly, or if I left the job, the process would continue and new recruiters could be trained using that process. When I worked at PRP, we described many processes in the company and documented our knowledge so it would remain in the company and every new team member could access it. That's why all the companies where I worked had knowledge bases in one way or another. At Alpha Bank, it was a Lotus Notes-based database. At STB TV channel, we simply used documents. Back then, we didn't have a specific system for knowledge management. In gaming, we use Confluence. At Preply, we used Google Docs and then used Bamboo for knowledge storage as well. There was also Confluence. Force, by the way, has an internal knowledge base where you can accumulate all kinds of documents. Well, in all these companies, the practice of storing information and knowledge existed in some form. Let's move on. A little story about my successes and achievements in case we don't know each other. I've been included in all possible rankings and nominations, won awards, received diplomas, spoke at conferences, was among the top 20 HR directors, and so on. And I have international certifications from leading HR organizations. Our academy has existed for quite a long time. It has already graduated more than 10,000 students, 130 online courses, a high level of loyalty, and many other achievements and successes for the academy. In my work, I rely on best practices. You can even see it today. When I conduct a course, I rely on my personal experience on one hand. That's 15 years of hiring experience and 5 years of consulting and advising companies. And these are all sorts of best global practices. These can be either company case studies or information from consulting companies and organizations. I've told you about myself and I'd appreciate it if you could write down what your job is. Because this course is so interesting, it can attract people from the training field, it can attract people in senior HR positions. Who else? It might attract methodologists too, so I'm really curious about what your position is. Who are you professionally? Please, those who can write in the chat. This course includes homework assignments like all our courses, for which we'll award a diploma on the top platform, Accreditable. Now about the course, it's a 6-session course. Today we're introducing the concept of knowledge management and there will already be useful materials. In the second session, we'll talk about how to create and store this knowledge. The third session is about how to disseminate and share it, because storing knowledge is pointless if it's not used. In the fourth session, we'll cover utilizing knowledge and integrating it into various processes. The fifth session is about evaluating and improving the knowledge management system, and the sixth is about knowledge management strategies. We'll study everything related to knowledge management in this course. Today, we'll discuss what it is, what types of knowledge exist, what challenges there are, and we'll also see how companies successfully use knowledge management systems. So, knowledge management, or in English, knowledge management. By the way, this is a very interesting field because it doesn't fall under a separate HR function. You probably won't find a knowledge management department. Maybe in some very large companies you'll find a methodology department like there was in Alpha Bank. But most often this will be part of the learning and development department, or it will simply be the responsibility of the HR director or team. What is it exactly? It's the preservation and exchange of information in a company about processes, techniques, and operations. The knowledge management approach values knowledge as a key resource. Indeed, in many companies, knowledge is the most important thing. I have some consulting clients who promote various online experts, and they have unique knowledge on how to take an expert in any field and turn them into a star in terms of webinars, trainings, or other content. They have everything clearly outlined with checklists. And this is their main resource. They store it like this, with several layers of knowledge protection. They have a certain level of secrecy. It's a very interesting company because if someone copies what they know, that's it. They'll face huge competition. They have no other advantage except that they found some secret ingredient for promoting experts. Knowledge management is especially important during the transition from a resource-based economy like oil or coal mining or metal smelting or automobile assembly to intellectual property businesses like Microsoft Windows or really any IT company. It's particularly important there. Because for an IT company, all they have is essentially their knowledge processes that they've accumulated. And knowledge management is about how people acquire, share, and disseminate knowledge. Let's move on. The concept of knowledge. What do we call knowledge? Knowledge is what people understand about things, concepts, ideas, theories, procedures, and practices. This can be called know-how or expertise. The company came up with some kind of process. It's their know-how. Many famous restaurants have unique menus, some unique dishes. How a particular dish is prepared, that's their know-how. Sometimes it's so secret that literally only the chef knows how to make it so no one else can copy that dish. Knowledge can be explicit, meaning it can be either described or recognized. I mean, I know what I need to tell a certain employee when they start work. And there's implicit knowledge. This is very interesting, and it's also very interesting to work with. We'll talk about that. This implicit knowledge is in people's heads and may be unconscious. People may not even realize that they know something very important. The goal of knowledge management is to make implicit knowledge explicit and described, in addition to managing explicit knowledge. The essence of knowledge management is very simple. It's about transferring knowledge from those who have it to those who need it now or in the future. We'll talk about this now. Many companies are afraid of losing a very important employee, not because they're a good employee. They might actually be a bad, toxic, harmful employee, but they know something that no one else knows, and they don't want to share it with anyone. The company asks, what should we do with them? They don't want to share. No one else knows. And here's the answer. Knowledge management will allow you to extract that knowledge from them. There are two main knowledge management strategies, broadly speaking. There's codification, recording knowledge in company systems where anyone can access it, like Confluence or Wiki or some kind of intranet or corporate social network. And there's personalization. Knowledge is linked to the employee, so the goal is to ensure maximum communication between them and other employees through conferences, workshops, communities, brainstorming, face-to-face meetings, mentoring, and so on. It's not necessarily about making a choice. You can implement both strategies. On one hand, record all the most valuable knowledge. On the other hand, personalize. This is personalization, knowledge transfer from one person to another. It's no longer a secret. If you want your employees to work more efficiently, creating a culture of knowledge sharing within the company is a significant advantage. And it's not just about efficiency, but also about saving a lot of time because all the necessary information is in one place. This is especially relevant for large companies where there can be quite similar divisions, where there's not much close collaboration. And it's very important that when one division finds some interesting solutions, it can share them with another division. For example, in television with 20 or 30 television projects, these are the programs we see on air. One project might come up with something unique, and it's important to spread that among others. This is very important in all kinds of holding companies. When one company or business can share some interesting tips with another company or business. This is very important in mergers and acquisitions. When one bank buys another bank and both banks are preserved, they need to exchange best practices between the banks and so on. In general, it's useful in many situations. Here's a cool quote from the former CEO of HP. If HP knew what HP knows, we would be 3 times more productive. What he meant was that in different parts of the company there's unique knowledge, but it's not really spread among absolutely everyone, and therefore the company is not as efficient and productive as it could be. If we made all of this completely accessible, we could achieve that. We'll talk more about this later. Overall, it's expected that artificial intelligence will be able to take on this role of gathering knowledge, organizing it, and so on. But as we're already seeing, artificial intelligence is not independent. It needs to be managed, it needs to be given certain parameters. So someone in the company needs to know how to manage knowledge in order to then utilize artificial intelligence to help automate this process. Knowledge is often undocumented, difficult to access, and at risk of disappearing. This is the most dangerous risk, because when an employee who has learned or discovered something in this company leaves, not something they were taught, but a solution they came to on their own, but didn't tell anyone and quit or retired if they're older employees, it could be disastrous. For example, in HR terms, imagine teams of recruiters and one of the recruiters found a way to quickly fill vacancies, where to find candidates specifically for this company, how to poach them, what to tell them, how to evaluate them, and then he suddenly leaves. And another recruiter comes in who doesn't know any of this. It may take the new recruiter several years to reach the same conclusions as the recruiter who left. But if there was knowledge management, the new recruiter would get the information from the previous recruiter and simply continue the work. Then knowledge would accumulate, with each person adding something new, rather than learning everything from scratch. You know, there are some books, there are some movies. Remember, you may have seen 50 First Dates. The main character wakes up every morning and doesn't remember anything about her life. She has to study, read, and remember everything each time just to get through the day. It's often the same in companies. Each new employee basically goes through the same process as the previous one, simply because the previous employee didn't pass on their insights to their successor. A study shows 58% believe they do basic work, while 45% believe the knowledge required for their job is unique. So there are many people who believe they have unique knowledge, and it's very important to preserve and pass on this knowledge. Unique knowledge makes up 51% of all employee knowledge, according to a study I'll link to. 81% believe unique knowledge is difficult to replace compared to professional training or formal education. Employees with knowledge management are 37% more effective compared to those without training, and there's a 26% higher quality of products and services where knowledge management is in place. Basically, in the situation I described where an employee leaves a job or retires, the company they leave loses not only the employee but also all the knowledge they gained during their entire time working there. This loss of knowledge comes at a great cost. According to Forbes estimates, it can cost Fortune 500 companies $31.5 billion a year just from the loss of employee knowledge. What can knowledge management improve in your company? First, productivity will increase. People often complain that they don't have access to the knowledge of their former colleagues. It's good if you have this organized somehow. If there's an opportunity to talk to a former colleague, or if the former colleague documented something valuable and important, and you can work with this information like a documented business process, and ideally set up automation. For example, if a new employee starts and no one knows the Wi-Fi password, they can't do any work while someone else wastes time looking for the password or searching for a network cable. And if customer service representatives have to solve each problem from scratch every time when they answer a call, it will take much longer than if they could quickly find answers in a knowledge base. Well, you may have dealt with call centers. They have a knowledge base where they find everything and can provide assistance. If an office manager wins the lottery and never returns to work, but all their records are stored locally on a password-protected computer, it might take someone in that department hours or days to access and retrieve important information. That's if there's no knowledge management. This affects engagement and retention. When employees share knowledge, they see the value they're creating in the company. Other employees see that the company is investing in their development, and they like that too. Knowledge transfer. Employees used to work in dynasties for 10 to 20 years, and knowledge was passed on organically. Now the average tenure has decreased dramatically. In leading IT companies in the US, the average employee tenure is 1 to 2 years. And if you don't organize knowledge management, then in general, all employees will sooner or later have zero understanding of what happened in the company before. Knowledge management systems improve the decision-making process. Information overload or the need for knowledge from people in different parts of the company to make decisions can affect managers. However, creating a knowledge management platform can facilitate faster, more effective, and better informed decision-making. You may know that there are two principles of law in the world. There's the so-called Roman law that we and Europe live by, and there's American case law, which is built on precedents. That is, if a court made a decision in some situation at some point, a lawyer or prosecutor can refer to that decision and urge the court to make the same decision in a new situation with a new defendant. This is called case law. The same applies to companies. Companies face various decisions. If a company once carefully weighed all the pros and cons and made a decision, and for example even did a retrospective, realizing it was a good decision, or conversely that it was a bad decision, having this information will make it easier to make decisions next time. You can say, we acted this way in a similar situation before, and it worked out well. Let's do exactly the same thing. It improves profitability, firstly by reducing the time to solve problems and tasks, and if your company and community are growing, it makes sense to invest in a solution that encourages users to solve each other's problems rather than hiring more and more employees over time. For example, many companies have eliminated traditional customer support. Instead of a help desk, you are directed to a knowledge base. By the way, I reached out to LinkedIn today. I used to correspond with them via email, but when I wrote to that address, they said, no, this is no longer for support. They told me to go to the database and look for the answer there. If you can't find it, there's a contact us link in small print at the bottom. Only then do I get to actual customer support. But you may have encountered this. Now, in many companies, you can't reach a human until you've gone through 3 circles of hell, reading through FAQs, and much more. Here are a few benefits that knowledge management provides. Examples. For example, probably the most famous company in the world that excels at knowledge management. It's Toyota, the car manufacturer. I'm sure everyone knows it. They have mentoring programs, job shadowing, and other employee training programs that help acquire knowledge by observing others at work. For example, new Toyota employees shadow experienced employees for several months, and new plants are initially staffed only with experienced workers from existing plants, plus a small number of new employees. This is called shadowing, where one employee observes the work of another employee. This shadowing allows for tacit knowledge transfer when the knowledgeable employee may not even be fully aware of what to tell the new employee, but demonstrates how things are done through their work. Document management systems, such as Google Drive and Microsoft's offerings, allow organizations to store company documents in the cloud, share them, and control access rights at a granular level. This also greatly helps in working with data, content management system CMS. For example, WordPress is probably the most popular one. We'll be looking at different systems in this course. There are many different ones. They make knowledge management easier compared to just storing files. Social networks, Workplace, Slack, and others also greatly help manage knowledge, allowing accumulation of information and conversations. Even employee chat conversations, if stored, can be valuable information for some employees. Chatbots. Artificial intelligence is also very popular now. We'll be talking about it, where artificial intelligence is fed various documents and then answers employee questions in a chatbot format. This is also a modern approach. The impact of knowledge management on the HR function. Firstly, knowledge management helps in planning the headcount. That is, when a company starts thinking of employees not just as performers of certain roles, but as carriers of expertise and knowledge, the company can plan for employees who will bring new knowledge. For example, ChatGPT emerged last year. Obviously, many companies didn't have expertise in working with artificial intelligence. Maybe no additional workforce is needed. But acquiring expertise in artificial intelligence is useful for many businesses. That's why many companies have open positions for artificial intelligence experts, so that person would be inside the company and bring this expertise, and then the company figures out how to use it. Recruiting. It allows understanding what competencies candidates need to be successful in a position when there is knowledge management. Onboarding ensures that new employees have access to the knowledge base of their company, department, and role. This allows them to be more effective at work and understand the expectations for their role. For example, when I went to work at Wargaming, which as an IT company had a more advanced knowledge management system, I was surprised by how much I could read in Confluence about HR work, about the work of different departments. Overall, there was a lot. I spent a long time reading everything available to me to get to know the company better. Strategic planning and goal setting influence the process of developing an employee development plan. I focus on specific knowledge to achieve the company's long-term goals. For example, let's take the same example with ChatGPT. A company that manages knowledge knows it needs to develop that expertise, so it sets goals for employees to acquire knowledge in working with artificial intelligence. Performance management ensures that employees have access to critical knowledge and expertise to work effectively. It's an ongoing process of communication and clarification of knowledge that optimizes employee efficiency and allows alignment with the company's strategic goals. For example, Google ensures that everyone in the company knows everyone else's goals, and this allows everyone to be a little more efficient by understanding who is working on what. Leadership development, providing the right knowledge and expertise that enhance the quality of leadership abilities for managers or the organization. Even basic instructions like how to conduct a performance review, how to hold a one-on-one meeting, how to interview a candidate, also help in developing leaders. Professional development. Many companies offer professional courses for development or provide links to various resources so people can grow, career path and career development. This helps ensure employees have the knowledge and competencies for their role, access to fill knowledge gaps, and an understanding of what they need to learn to achieve their career goals. IT outsourcing companies like IBM do this well. They create knowledge catalogs detailing what you need to learn to become a certain type of developer, complete with courses, articles, and books all in one place. Achievement recognition programs expands the program to recognize employees who contribute to knowledge sharing that leads to company success. Compensation, a way of rewarding employees for important work, contributing to company goals, sharing their knowledge, and developing new skills on the job. Succession management also influences knowledge management, providing access to internal and external knowledge and expertise to ensure the availability of experienced and promotion-ready employees who can step into specific roles when they become available. Interestingly, many companies have a lot of information in various forms, but it's not structured at all. This suggests that such companies primarily need a knowledge management strategy. The typical problem is the lack of such a strategy. Sending outdated attachments to customers is very bad, especially when the sales department sends something that's no longer relevant. Sending old assets to the designer, spending forever looking for a file when the information I needed was emailed. That's what happens when there's no knowledge management. The solution is that you need a knowledge management strategy because all companies over time produce many things: policies, documents, guidelines, assets. All of this gets duplicated and multiplied. A big problem arises when there are many different versions of various documents. That's why Alpha Bank created a methodology department at some point, because many departments were generating lots of documents, and it became difficult to understand where these documents were, which version was the latest, and whether they were standardized or not. So what is a knowledge management strategy? The ultimate goal of any knowledge management is a state of organized nirvana, where everything an employee might need is easily accessible and the employee knows how to find it. And a knowledge management strategy is your plan to achieve this goal. This can take various forms. It could involve moving content online. In large companies, it might be a knowledge base and even a dedicated team organizing this knowledge. So what should you consider? It's helpful to start with a simple audit to understand what documents you have, what content you have, what tools you have. You might find that one team uses one tool, another team uses Trello, a third team uses Google Docs, and a fourth team puts everything in Notion. A fifth team might have even made some short videos. You need to examine everything. The audit includes a content audit, meaning you can create a document listing which team has what document, the type of document, where it is stored, just to organize everything initially. Also tools. If different teams in the company use different tools, all of this needs to be listed and acknowledged. Who uses what? Some tools might be used by everyone. Step 2. You need to choose a strategy here, and you can select a strategy depending on the size of your company. For a small business, it could be creating a simple knowledge base. It will not be anything complex. For a medium-sized business, it could be creating an integrated internal toolkit. For a large business, you might need a full-fledged team to handle this, and it will essentially be logical and cost-effective. The company will gain more benefits than costs. Step 3. You need to train your employees. You will need to teach employees how to work with knowledge. Knowledge will not appear in the system automatically. Employees will need to be involved and trained. How does it work? Collect and preserve important business knowledge and information, make the collected information accessible and easy to retrieve, and regularly update the collected information to ensure continued accuracy. Examples from Toyota Company. Dr. Philip Fong says there are two types of knowledge that need to be considered in knowledge management: explicit and tacit, and he uses the example of a chef to show the difference. Look, while a chef might be able to write down the recipe for her most famous dish, she would probably have a hard time explaining how she came up with that recipe. There is a difference between what we know, explicit knowledge, and how we do what we know, tacit knowledge. Or as Fong says, we can do more than we can say, that is tacit knowledge. Toyota's approach to knowledge management considers both explicit and tacit knowledge. To share its knowledge, Toyota details all the tasks performed by its employees in a job instruction document, and there are 3 columns of information. Basic steps, i.e., step-by-step instructions on how to complete the task, key points and tips regarding them, and reasons explaining why these tips and warnings are important. Microsoft is a giant company. They are the developers of many tools, Office 365, SharePoint, and many others. They've recently released Microsoft Loop, by the way. Of course, such a company is unique and engages in knowledge management. They have a massive online portal that they created called SharePoint, and in general, they actively use and share all information. It's probably difficult to even list everything Microsoft does. What's also interesting is that Microsoft was one of the first to envision that artificial intelligence would automatically collect and update information by tracking the digital footprints of an employee's activities. And it's slowly starting to happen, by the way, with Apple Intelligence, their new functionality. It's designed to help organize all your knowledge and information on your phone or laptop and provide you with convenient access. But again, having artificial intelligence doesn't eliminate the need to understand knowledge management. So it's only an assistant. An assistant is useful where there's an understanding of why it's needed. Amazon is also a unique company in the field of knowledge management. Since Amazon processes billions of transactions every month, it's impractical for the company to have a live customer service representative to answer all questions coming through the call center, provide all updates, and resolve every complaint. Instead, the company uses artificial intelligence, knowledge repositories, and voice recognition technology to support simple customer queries. You may have encountered less well-known companies where you call and an artificial intelligence voice tries to help you. Google is also very advanced in this regard. They've been fans of knowledge management for a long time. They have, for example, a concept in the knowledge field called nudging in English. For instance, Google has a set of useful information for managers, employees, and various processes. Let's look at the employee onboarding process. Managers, on the Sunday before a new employee starts work, receive a very brief note, a piece of knowledge, what needs to be done that's very important with a new employee to improve their performance. The result, when such a simple prompt was implemented, was that employees started adapting faster. Although it's a simple reminder tool for a manager to prepare for an employee's arrival, checklists, all kinds of checklists, I'm personally a big fan, by the way, and have created many of them, are also a way of managing knowledge. Even if it's just a list of questions, yes, we're all human, so sometimes we forget the basics. In general, checklists were invented probably popularized by Atul Gawande, who was once invited to develop a procedure to reduce fatal and problematic outcomes in surgical operations. And he came up with a 19-item checklist that reduced the complication rate and fatality rate by almost half. Thanks to the checklist, he later wrote a book about checklists. So, for example, Google understands that simply giving employees access to some information is not enough. You need to ensure that the employee or manager receives the information at the right time, and the list should be meaningful with easily accomplishable activities. For example, a piece of information from Google that managers receive as a prompt before meeting an employee, and because of this, obviously managers perform their jobs a little better. Since there are hundreds, if not thousands, of such prompts, all processes are improved slightly thanks to these hints, because with these smart prompts, managers often don't need to remember exactly what to do and when. Everything is there, all the checklists. Even a page and a half of useful text can produce significant results, and so on. There are many examples for Googlers. That is, the company sends recommendations to managers, sends recommendations to new employees, again, during the adaptation period, which helps employees adapt better. For example, a reminder of the 5 steps for onboarding new employees is sent immediately, then again 2 weeks later. And studies show that employees who follow these tips adapt faster. That is, those who started asking for feedback adapted better. Similarly, Google does a great job with internal training. They maximize the use of their employees to train other employees. They don't just look for experts somewhere else, but they find them too, while also actively using internal employees. They have a principle they call the local maximum. In any profession, there's someone within the company who's stronger than others. If they can bring others up to their level as much as they can, everyone will improve. Yes, you don't need to look for some super expert. Bring people up at least to the level of the most expert person within the company. This expert person, which is great, understands your company perfectly, and in this regard can even surpass external experts. At Google, it's called G2G, Googler to Googler. They conduct thousands of events annually involving thousands of employees. Here are some figures. And there are courses, for example, on absolutely different topics, from professional to personal development and hobbies. And what's also important is to try, of course, to choose programs that will change behavior as much as possible, not just provide knowledge. So there you have it. This was about the general concept of knowledge management, what it is, with examples of how it works. Homework. Either audit your current knowledge management strategy or choose a platform where you could do this and create a few pages on that platform, or make a checklist for any process, the way you do it in the company, with at least 10 items. For example, a checklist for a manager on conducting an interview with a candidate. That's if you're really struggling to come up with a checklist to create. What's next? Next, we'll discuss creating a knowledge repository. That's all for now. Thank you all. I invite you to take the course and see you soon. Bye-bye.